This is the Longbox Review comic book podcast. I'm your host, Eric. Welcome to the show. Today's episode is another My Comics History episode where I'm going to be covering, so to speak, comics that I purchased in November, December 1978. And you may be asking yourself, why is he doing 2 months instead of the usual one as he has been for the last 2 episodes? Well, that's because I didn't buy any comic books in November and December 1978. But there is a comic book that I will be talking about that did come out in December, but I purchased much later. I'll explain this all when I get to that point. So we'll just skip over the comics purchase then. I imagine that I did not buy any comics during that time, just because of the holidays, and I probably didn't have any extra money to buy anything. Whereas, leading up to this point in my life at that time, I probably was doing some chores and doing some extra work to get some extra money. And I probably spent it all, or I don't remember when I actually started buying my family presents. I think it was later than this. I don't think I actually bought anything then. Anyway, regardless, I didn't buy anything, which surprised the hell out of me when I went through Mike's Amazing World of Comics, looking for everything that from Marvel and DC, of course, at that time. That was many years before I started buying comics from other companies. But there was just nothing that I saw that I have in my collection, nothing that I saw that I remembered buying, even if I don't have it in my collection. So there you go. But I did buy some other comics later that came out during this time period. And the first of which is Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes number 248, which came out on November 30th. 1978. The cover shows Mon-El threatening to kill Sunboy for the apparent death of Shadowlass. I've not read this issue, but man, after looking at that cover, I want to. Also, that came out from Marvel, and this is Marvel Tales 101 from December 12th. I actually had this first as a record/comic book combo. Those old Peter Pan records, and I talked about one of the Superman ones in a previous episode, but I had this one, and this is the one with the man-wolf, and I recall that I got this issue sometime after this as well, but as I recall, I had a torn cover. I no longer have that issue in my collection, though. Adventure Comics number 462 came out on December 14th. This is the famous, or perhaps infamous, depending on how you think about it, Batman of Earth 2 story where he dies. He is killed, or he dies in, saving his beloved city from this. If I remember correctly, it's a criminal that he put away as, I think, commissioner when he became police commissioner. And this guy somehow got some superpowers and came after him. And I believe Bruce ended up basically sacrificing himself to stop this criminal. I could be misremembering this. So anyway, but I did purchase this in 2016 for 26 times the cover price. This is when I was trying to get all the Adventure Comics, a particular run of Adventure Comics, and I had to have that one, and that was a pretty penny that I spent on that one. And I have to say, it's okay. Anyway, another Legion comic at the end of December 28th, one day before my birthday, which that would have made me how old? That would have made me 10 that year. Anyway, this is Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes number 249, of course, which would, of course, follow 248. Anyway, the Legion battles a chemical monster, and Chameleon Boy impresses an alien ambassador, basically. And I haven't read that one either. So, got to get to those old Legion comics that I love so much, or at least claim to love. All right. Notable comics that I want to talk about. First of all, this is actually not a comic, but it's comic book related. This is the Great Superman book by Michael L. Fleischer, published by Crown Harmony on November 1st. And on the cover, it exclaims, "The complete encyclopedia of the folk hero of America," and is the, quote, product of 7 years of research. So I've heard of this book. I don't think I've ever seen it in the wild. I certainly don't have it, never read it. But if you have, I'd be really curious, is this worth picking up? Should I go find a copy somewhere, if I can? Also came out in November 14th, Shogun Warriors #1. This is notable to me personally because my brother actually got this issue. And I remember him being so proud that he got that first issue. I was into comics, obviously, for a few months. And I think, being my younger brother, he was wanting to join in on the fun. And he got this. I don't remember if my mom bought this for him or I bought it for him or he bought it. I don't remember. I remember I did read this after he did, but I don't remember anything about it, anything notable about it. And I did not, nor do I continue to have any interest in giant robot stories. Okay. Next up at the end of November 28th, on the 28th, Warren presents Ring of the Warlords #1. And so this is a reprint book of fantasy adventure stories from Warren magazines, timed to coincide with the release of the original, but unrelated, Lord of the Rings movie, that animated movie that has, if I remember correctly, this has animation overlaid with some live action or rotoscope stuff. I don't remember. It's been so long since I've seen that, and I've been actually wanting to watch that again just to see how it holds up after all this time. Anyway, there were stories in this by Wally Wood, Roger McKenzie, Bill Dubay, Bud Lewis, Esteban Maroto, which I believe, Peter and I talked about on one of the Legion Project podcasts, Maroto doing some wonderful artwork. Was that the Amethyst miniseries? And finally, Nicola Cuddy, with art by Esteban Maroto, Gonzalo Mayo, and Wally Wood, with a cover by Manuel Sanjulian, and was edited by Louise Jones. All right, and this next one is where I was tripping up at the beginning of this episode, because Battlestar Galactica #1 came out on December 12th. And this is the reason why I actually have a book that I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. Anyway, Battlestar Galactica was my third favorite fandom property after Star Trek and comic books. I got on the Battlestar Galactica bandwagon early on. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. And just so you know, I loved the reboot series, except for that last part of the 4th season. Anyway, according to the Marvel Database Wiki, this is a reprint of part of the Marvel Comics Super Special #8, and that is the comic that I have in my collection, with new material or changed material added to that first issue. And then it was the second and third issue was also telling a similar story. I'll get into later. And like I said, so this is the book that I'm going to be talking about. So while I don't think anyway, whenever I look at the Battlestar Galactica #1 comic book cover, that screams to me that I had that at one point. But I cannot completely and honestly say, yes, I had that book. But I'm pretty sure I did. But I can't prove it. So, but I did get a few of the later issues, I believe #4 and something else. Anyway, it's been a long time. I don't have any Battlestar Galactica, old Battlestar Galactica, the Marvel Comics version, in my collection anymore. So I've often thought about maybe buying some of those issues and retaking a look at that, but we'll see. Also came out in December on the 14th is the famous first edition C61, reprinting some stories from early issues of Action Comics in a tabloid format. Now, I have seen this at a couple cons over the years, thought about getting it, but given the price tag that I saw, I was like, well, no, that's okay. Super Friends number 18 came out on December 28th. And Peter and I actually talked about some aspects of this issue on a Tales of the Legion project for Legionnaires 3. And so put that out in June and 2020, so you can check that out. I'll also have a link in the show notes if you're interested. And finally, another notable comic, Weird Western Tales number 53, also on December 28th. And I just put that on there because I like the cover showing Scalp Hunter arm wrestling Abe Lincoln. And I've seen that cover before. Probably not back in 1978, but I've seen it over the years, and just look, I don't know, it looks like fun, even though culturally insensitive. Yes. So that's the notable comics from that time period. So let's get into Battlestar Galactica number 1, sort of. Like I said, came out in December 1978. But I didn't get it, like I said, but I did get, as I said, the Marvel Super Special, the Battlestar Galactica, the official adaptation of the television sensation, it says on the cover. And I bought this a few years ago from a coworker who was selling some books. And mostly what I got from him was some Spider-Man issues, but he also had this as well. And Horror of Horrors, because this is a tabloid format. He had folded it in half. I'm not sure why he did that. Maybe to fit it in a box or something. But oh boy, I was not happy to see that. But I dutifully unfolded it and laid it flat to at least restore, that part of it. It's not in great condition, and I didn't spend that much on it overall, but it's been sitting on my shelf for a while, and this was a great opportunity for me to talk about it, which is really the whole reason for me to do these episodes, so I can talk about some old comics in my collection. Okay. So like I said, Marvel Super Special number 8. It's got a Spider-Man corner box, although it's not a box, it's a circle. At the bottom of the cover, it says, in full Marvel color, ! With Marvel color being one word. I don't know if that is a spacing issue, or they actually meant to use that as some sort of named thing, a trademark even, although it's not trademarked, like Battlestar Galactica is shown on the cover. This is based on the first episode, the pilot episode of the television series by Glenn Larson, with Ernie Colon doing the art, Roger McKenzie is the writer, Jim Novak did the letters, and Richard Marshall is the editor of it, with a cover by Rick Bryant. There is some additional art in this, including some pinups by Marvel artists at the time, but I'll talk about those later. There were actually 3 versions of this special that were printed, one with a painted cover by Bryant, which I do not have. I have the probably more available common version, which is the non-painted version. And then there was another one called a Special Collector's Edition from Modern Promotions. But from what I could find, these 2 editions, mine and the MP version, were exactly the same except for the cover dress. And no, I did not look at why Modern Promotions was doing a version of this, but whatever. I wanted to give a little bit of background on Battlestar Galactica, the TV series, just to give you an idea, in case you're not familiar with Battlestar Galactica, or maybe you're only familiar with the reboot series from, what was that, 2000, early 2000s? I don't know, whenever it was. Anyway, like I said, this Battlestar Galactica was like my fandom from basically the start, even though I didn't watch that first pilot episode when it aired. It debuted in the United States on September 17th, 1978. It was called Saga of a Star World. Fun fact about this, I found out, which is why I'm pretty sure I did not watch this when it first aired. About 30 minutes before the scheduled end of the broadcast, it was interrupted by the signing of the Egyptian-Israeli Camp David Accords. And that took about an hour. And then the episode picked up where it left off. So I can only imagine that this thing had to have been, 2 hours? Maybe more. the episode itself, because it's in syndication, it's chopped up into 3 episodes. But I can only imagine that it would only be a 2-hour TV movie. I did not look that up for some reason. Anyway, which means, okay, so that means an hour and a half. So let's assume it's 2 hours. So we're talking 9:30, an hour goes by. So 10:30, they show the final 30 minutes of this thing, which is why I'm pretty damn sure I did not watch this when it first aired. Because I wouldn't have been allowed to stay up that late at that time. One other fun fact, I would find this out later, but I had already watched him at that point. But the actor who played Apollo's younger brother, Zach, who ends up dying in that pilot episode, was played by Rick Springfield, who is one of my top 5 favorite musicians, my musical artists. So, in fact, he was top of the heap for a long time, but he's been bumped off by another artist. Anyway, so yeah, it's always fun to see a younger Rick Springfield acting, and I always wanted to see an alternate version of this where Zach stayed alive and Rick Springfield continue in that role. In fact, he was, as I recall, he was supposed to, but they decided last minute to kill him off to give Apollo something to be broody about. There were 24 episodes in all between the first season. Well, no, that is the first season. 24 episodes in the first season, with some memorable ones, at least for me, such as the 2-part The Living Legend with the character Commander Kane, played by Lloyd Bridges. And that character would be reimagined in the reboot by Michelle Forbes. Lloyd Bridges, this is an interesting Star Trek connection, was considered by Gene Roddenberry to play Captain Pike in the first Star Trek pilot. But Bridge wasn't interested. He told Roddenberry that, quote, he'd seen science fiction and didn't want to be within 100 miles of it. That's why he didn't play Pike. It'd be interesting to know, had he done that, would they have gone to series with him, or they would, what would happen there? But anyway, he obviously changed his tune. Coming back, 12 years later and playing in a science fiction show. And then another great 2-parter was War of the Gods, where another great guest star, Patrick Macnee of the Avengers fame, played Count Ibley, a devil-like foil to Commander Adama. And it sort of serves as there's a connection. I was going to say sequel, but there's a connection to the Living Legend episode in this. So, which was really cool when I remember watching that for the first time and like, oh my gosh, this happened to that? Except for comics, that may be the first time I recognized continuity in a television series, perhaps, maybe. Anyway, the show was canceled after its first season, but they retooled the show into a cheaper, more kid-friendly version called Galactica 1980, which was set 30 years later and only had Lorne Greene as Adama and Herb Jefferson Jr. as Colonel Boomer instead of Lieutenant Boomer returning to the show. That show only lasted 10 episodes, with the only one that I really enjoyed, really liked, had nothing to do with the Galactica 1980 cast, except for Adama being in it. But it was called The Return of Starbuck, and it basically gave some backstory as to what happened to Starbuck. But really, what I wanted to know as a kid was what happened to Apollo. But Richard Hatch had no interest in returning to that. And I believe Dirk Benedict was unavailable to film, and so they changed the story around and made it 30 years later and up-aged Boxey to play Captain Troy, and his buddy, his right-hand man, his second in command, Lieutenant Dillon, I think. Don't remember who played that part. Anyway, 10 episodes, Super Scouts, time travel. It wasn't very good. But I do remember watching that from the get-go as well and being disappointed. I think maybe the first time I also experienced disappointment in a sequel. All right. And I already mentioned the Sci-Fi Channel reboot, which I thought was phenomenal for the most part. I love this show so much that I actually made a Viper out of a paper towel and toilet paper cores, the roll cores, to be the fuselage and the engines. And I made wings out of, and a sort of a cockpit out of cardboard. I also, for Halloween, probably that year, I traced out or drew the front face, if you're looking straight on, the helmets that they would wear in the show, those sort of Egyptian looking helmets. I drew one of those out and cut it out in cardboard, attached some string, and I went as Captain Apollo. We had gone school clothes shopping sometime in September, I would guess, and asked my mom to buy me this particular shirt, which was kind of this tan and brown thing, but it had stripes going horizontally across the top of it. And I thought, well, that's sort of kind of maybe looked like the uniform that they would wear. And so I wore that and the helmet and, no gun as I recall, but anyway, but I really loved it. I would draw vipers, like a side view of a viper all the time. I remember one time in art class, we were supposed to paint something with complementary colors. And I drew out as I did quite often, like I said, a viper, and then I started painting it blue and orange because those are the colors I chose. And my art teacher came over and sat with me. I was sitting by myself for some reason that day. And this is why I remember this, because my art teacher came over and he started doing art at my table and was just kind of talking with me and asking me about the viper and all that stuff. So it made this young nerd quite happy to be talking to an adult about these things. So let's get into the Marvel Super Special number 8, Battlestar Galactica adaptation. The synopsis from the Marvel Database Wiki is the following. Cylons betray human hopes for peace in a sneak attack that destroys most of the human fleet. Adama commands the Battlestar Galactica to lead an exodus of human survivors to a legendary planet known only as Earth. Unlike the other comic book synopses that I've read from the Marvel Database Wiki, that was pretty sparse. So I'm going to add some things to this. Let's see. So in this, because this is not exactly like the televised version, it's because they probably got a preliminary script and was drawing. They wrote the comic, they drew the comic, and then even though it came out after the series debuted, it's a little off. And you'll hear why, how. Anyway, Apollo and his younger brother Zach, as I mentioned, are on patrol and they discover the Cylon fleet. On the way back to warn the fleet of the impending attack, Zach is killed. During the Cylon assault, all Battlestars but the Galactica, at least as we see here on the page, are destroyed. Adama orders the Galactica to his homeworld of Caprica, and I'll interject here to say that I thought it was cool that Adama and Apollo were from a planet named after my astrological sign. That was I forgot to mention that earlier. It's one of the things I liked about the show. It's like Caprica, Capricorn. Oh, cool. All right. Both father and son find that their wife and mother were killed. That doesn't sound right. It's Apollo's mother, Adama's wife, were killed in the attack. So Apollo not only loses his brother, well, both of them, brother, son, and wife, mother. Wow, that sounds weird. Never mind. Apollo tells the assembled survivors to leave the planet in any ship they can and join the Galactica. I am pretty sure, however, that speech was Adama's in the show, and like I said, that's one of the discrepancies. The middle of so that's the first part of it. The middle of the book is interrupted by pinups and articles that I'll get to later. And so then the second half of this, with the fleet assembled, Adama tells the people that are on the ship that they need to seek out the lost 13th tribe of humanity and ask for their help. They need to find Earth. But unlike the Marvel Database Wiki synopsis, there's a lot more that happens. Which is, Apollo, Starbuck, and Boomer are assessing damage and supplies on the fleet ships. On one, they discover people in dire need of food and water, which is in short supply generally. Meanwhile, Baltar is brought before the Cylon Imperial leader. Baltar is angry that his colony was not spared per the deal he made with the Cylons, but the Cylons can't trust a human who would betray his own, so they kill him, chop his head off, in fact. The Imperial leader is told of survivors, and he orders his warriors to scour the universe to destroy them all. Adama was leading the fleet to an old mining planet for supplies, but his plan is challenged by Sire Yuri, who wants to go to a closer one. Apollo volunteers to take a few Viper pilots through a Nova remnant that has Cylon mines and clear a path for the fleet, thus saving time to get to the mining planet. Before that mission, Apollo helps Boxy, a young Capricorn boy who is distraught that he has lost his pet Daggett, by giving him a robot version. Boxy's mother, Lyra, is grateful for the help. Later, the trio of pilots clear away the mines and the fleet proceeds to the mining planet Carillon. As the Colonials look for supplies on Carillon, they are watched by its inhabitants, the Ovians, whose Queen Lotte has allied with the Cylons. Okay, wait a minute. When I read that, Queen Lotte, is that where Tula Lotte took her name, her pen name? I actually tried to look this up and find out, but I couldn't find anything at this point. So if you know anything about why Tula Lotte, the artist, took that name, and if it's not because of Battlestar Galactica, I really want to know. Actually, I want to know if it is Battlestar Galactica, because that would be really cool. All right. Queen Lotte is ordered to make the humans welcome and comfortable until the Cylon fleet arrives. Some days later on Galactica, Lyra receives some bad news. She was exposed to radiation and only has days to live. She asks the doctor not to tell anyone. While Sire Yuri, boy, say that 5 times fast. While Sire Yuri is confident that Cylons won't find the survivors at Carillon, Adama doesn't trust the Ovians. Starbuck and Boomer also discover some men who are dressed as pilots, but they don't recognize them. When Starbuck confronts them, they run. When Starbuck, Apollo, and Lyra follow the imposters to the lower levels, they discover the Ovian-Cylon alliance, and a fight ensues. Starbuck realizes that the laser fire between them is igniting the tilium in the cave walls, which is the fuse lighting the biggest bomb in the universe, he says. As they retreat, Apollo discovers humans in tubes and realizes that the Ovians are collecting them as food. The pilots all head for their Vipers at that point. As the Cylon fleet approaches, Adama springs his trap, for most of the pilots were still on Galactica and not on the planet's surface, as he wanted the Ovians to think. But he is the one who sent the imposters to fool Lotte and the Cylons. The Colonial pilots are able to beat back the Cylons, and Carillon explodes. During the celebration, Lyra asks Apollo to look after Boxy, but he's confused by the request. And in the last panel, the fleet moves through space toward Earth. All right, so before I get into kind of my thoughts about the special, overall, I just want to say the front cover by Bryant, I particularly like. I wish I've seen a picture of the painted one. I wish I had that version because it looks much better, actually, even though it's basically the same drawing, which is of the Galactica, very large on the front cover. We got a Cylons flying around. One of them shooting at a Viper who's coming towards us in it. And this is a wraparound cover, so the backside features more Vipers more prominently, dogfighting with some raiders, with a planet in the background, and we see some explosions. Like there's even a mushroom cloud, so to show the devastation that the Cylons are raining down. And in the background, right above the planet, is a Cylon base star. Anyway, I love that forefront Viper of the 3 on the back cover because it looks screen accurate, whereas the Galactica looks a little flat. It doesn't quite look like the show version of it, which is understandable. I get it. All right. Anyway, so as far as the comic itself, this is a pretty quick retelling of the pilot episode, with some things being quite compressed, like the battle scenes, but again, understandably so. A comic book story is not a TV story after all, and so while they can take up precious minutes in showing a dogfight on television, that's exciting and cool, but in a comic book, probably not so much. Other things were left dangling, like Lyra's impending death at the end. It was literally the last page, the last few panels, before they just go, oh, and then Galactica just keeps going on. It has to be that, Marvel, they're already developing the ongoing series that they were going to launch just a few months later after this came out. And they would pick up the story there, but, it just seems like a odd bit to throw in a standalone story like this. But, I mean, they were adapting the script, so I don't know. Regardless, it was fun to read a different version of the story, even with the inaccuracies. It kind of makes it even neater to me that it doesn't quite match. I'll get into some of those here in a second. Ernie Colon does a pretty good job on likenesses when he wasn't completely wrong as to which character he was drawing. I'll talk about that at the end. And also on the ships, much like my comment about the Galactica on the cover, that's always been a pet peeve of mine when reading Battlestar Galactica comics. As I said, a few of those that I read, Star Trek comics especially, if the ships don't look right, I have a harder time forgiving that than if the likenesses of the actors aren't quite as accurate. So ships over actors all the time, artists, if you will, please. Given how much story was being crammed, and this is just 30 pages. I mean, it's actually, the whole thing is 50 pages. Although they counted the front cover and the table of contents as pages. So, but not the back cover. Anyway, so 30 pages of actual comic book story, and the rest of it is cover and the middle section. So a lot to cram into those 30 pages. There's lots of panels and word balloons, which I felt didn't leave a lot of room for Colon's expressive style. Maybe he wasn't the best person to do this one. I mean, but he does it. He does a good job with what he has to accomplish in those 30 pages. Regardless, there were a few standout panels, such as the one where Starbucks and Boomer's faces are shown across from each other on a wide panel in front of the blackness of space. And so they're supposed to be talking to each other while they're in their Vipers. And so in the middle part, you see their Vipers sort of in the distance as they're doing stuff. And then you get to see their faces, a closer up view of their faces as they're wearing the helmets talking to each other. So I thought that was a really cool way to depict that. And later there is a close-up of Adama's face, his emotional face after he knows that Zach has been killed by the Cylons. Really well drawn and portrayed by Colon there. Later we get we get a page showing Lyra and Boxy as the attack on Caprica happens, but those are larger panels showing Lyra specifically, which to me, that's a much more recognizable Colon thing. He liked to display the women. Okay, and so there's that part of it. That's the kind of like my overall thoughts about the story. It was pretty good. As far as the pinups, which was, I always love specials. DC put out those 80-page giant anniversary character specials some years ago. Or no, 80th anniversary. I don't know if they are 80-page giants. 80th anniversary specials. And they would always include pinups. And I know pinups are a long comic book tradition going way back, but those are the ones I'm thinking about right now. But this comic includes some, including the inside front cover, which is a black and white splash of Cylons emerging from a raider about to attack, while you see other Cylon raider ships flying overhead. This was done by Dave Cockrum. According to, and this is where I get all these, because some of these pinups are signed and others aren't that I could find anyway. But this is according to the Grand Comic Books or Grand Comics database. The table of contents page has some art by Rick Marshall, featuring the double-eyed, double-mouthed singers shown in the casino scene on Carillon, and this triangular-headed alien that I think Colon draws a bit differently in the same scene in the story. So, on page 21, after Apollo tells the Capricorns to get off-world in any ship they can, we get another pinup showing some bug-eyed aliens who I think are the Ovians, but that's at the top, and then at the bottom is a great top-down view of a Cylon raider, all done by Bruce Patterson. And so I think that's supposed to depict like the Ovian-Cylon alliance or something. But I will be honest, knowing some of the supposed history of the Cylons. They were supposed to be this reptilian race. I thought maybe that was maybe them. They were supposed to be depicting the Cylons there, but they are bug-eyed and they look like the Ovians in the issue or the special, and so I'm pretty sure that my original supposition was incorrect. Let's see here. Joe Rubinstein does a splash page featuring Starbuck at top right, and then him and Apollo at the bottom left, and then we see a Cylon Raider. I don't know. It's this weird like concentric circle thing, like it's a radar map or something, but it's not quite. I don't know. It's just, I would say the artist took license in depicting that particular image. Anyway, not one of my favorites. My favorite thing, though, is this next one done by Howard Bender, who did sign this. It's a double splash. So, and you actually have to turn the comic 90 degrees and hold it up to see this. But this is showing Adama in front of a view screen with a background of planets and stars in the distance. But then as you go down, starting about his chest and then down through his waist area, it's overlaid. Instead of showing him specifically, it's overlaid with a bunch of images taken from the story or taken from, and it's done in this really cool. And I went on social media to ask people what and show them a picture of this or a part of a picture of this, and people responded with what they thought that style was, because I was like, I'm not sure what you call this thing, and eventually a couple of people said, this is what is referred to, generally speaking, as contour lines. And I looked it up. It's like, yeah, that I could see that with some coloring aspects to it, which may be referred to as posturization. I think that's the term that I was given. So, but anyway, it looks really cool. If you can, you should search online to see if you can find a copy of that image, or maybe I will, and I'll link to it if I can find it. Really nicely done by Mr. Bender. Got a couple more of these. There's another Ovian pinup by Dave Cockrum, and then when I saw this, I'm like, oh, this is why. It's the other pinup. Those are definitely the Ovians, even though the artists drew them just a little differently, but they're still bug-eyed, insectoid-like creatures, which is the Ovians. And then the final pinup is of Muffet, the Robot Daggett by Rick Bryant, which is, fine. Actually there is. Oh no, this is not a pinup. But what they do have on the inside back cover is a Marvel ad. Featuring a few Marvel comic books, specifically Fantastic Four number 202, guest starring Iron Man, with cover art by Dave Cockrum and John Buscema, and Amazing Spider-Man 189 with cover art by John Byrne and Bob McLeod. I find this a bit serendipitous since I talked about issue 188 last time. I did not buy issue 189, obviously, and I never read it. So, but the cover's kind of cool with this character wrapped in bandages like he's a mummy or something, and holding J. Jonah Jameson outside of a hospital window. And you're supposed to read it to find out who the mystery person is. I'm pretty sure it's his son, but. And then below that is some text welcoming us to the Marvel Universe. And I'll just read what it says here. The Marvel Universe, it's where the Hulk rampages, Spidey spins his crime-fighting web, the Fantastic Four battle the weirdest enemies around. It's where Captain America, Doctor Strange, Iron Man, the Avengers, and X-Men fight for justice everywhere, every way. It's where savagery erupts in the pages of Conan the Barbarian, Red Sonja, Thor, and Tarzan, and where science fiction looms larger than life in Star Wars, John Carter of Mars, and Star-Lord. And it's where the new line of Marvel Color, oh, there it is. So Marvel Color magazines, and Marvel Color is all one word, introduce a revolutionary method of color reproduction that creates startling effects in titles like Jaws 2, Kiss, Battlestar Galactica, Star-Lord, Savage Sword, Weird World, and The Hulk. Welcome to the Marvel Universe. You may never want to go home again. maybe the whole Marvel color thing is what I'm seeing in a lot of this. Like I said, it's not just the Adama pinup. There is a lot of contour line work in this that features some, I'll say, different coloring choices. Not everything is realistic. Instead of actual shading, we get different color variations. So, maybe that's what that means. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's so revolutionary that creates startling effects means in that script there. So, anyway. As for the articles, I won't go into great detail with these because really they're just providing background information and some information about the show. But just for completeness sake, the Wizard of Hollywood's Dream Factory is an interview by Steve Swires with John Dykstra, who, of course, did special effects for Star Wars and then was a producer on Battlestar Galactica. That is actually a very interesting article because Dykstra talks a lot about the challenges of producing a weekly TV show, and he gets into the technical aspects of filming and cameras and all sorts of stuff that they have to do, not just for Battlestar Galactica, but he talks a little about the Star Wars stuff. So if you're into that kind of thing, that would be an interesting read for you. And then Tom Rogers wrote the rest of these: Life in the Future, Battle Tactics, Spaceships and Such, Hardware of the Future, and finally Aliens and Robots. Like I said, all of this is providing information about, background information about the show and the setting, and a bit of speculation about where things might go, and all that stuff. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, which normally I am, but it was okay. I sped read through those. All right. My final thing here, so a bit of I mentioned before about how this super special is not exactly representing in 100% accuracy the actual pilot that aired. And so here, then this is information I took from the Marvel Database Wiki. Here are some of the discrepancies because I thought they were interesting. Artist Cologne did not have the proper reference material, it says, for most of the actors when he drew this original version, and they attempted to fix most of these anachronisms in the second version, which is the monthly series. For example, on the second page, Baltar was originally drawn as a bald man. His hair, because John Colicos is the actor who had hair in the series, and so they wanted to be a little more accurate. So, in the monthly version, hair was added. Pages 5 and 6 of the special have been replaced by completely new art, and 5 and 6. So, 5 is showing the celebration with the Council of 12. About the impending peace signing. And then 6 is basically Apollo and Zach heading off and discovering the Cylons are going to attack. Starting on page 7, Colonel Ty was originally drawn to resemble actor Richard Hatch, Apollo, instead of Terry Carter, and he wore a pilot's uniform instead of a command uniform. That is definitely something that I quickly noticed. I'm like, wait a minute, that can't be Apollo. No, I see what they did. Obviously, his likeness and outfit was altered in the first 3 issues of the monthly series. Pages 8 and 9 were completely replaced by new art. That's the fight with the Cylons that Apollo and Zach have, and the Galactica realizing that Apollo and Zach are under attack and that their communications are being jammed. Also on page 9, Baltar was mistakenly drawn to resemble actor Lorne Greene, which that's confusing as hell. On the next page, page 10, Apollo was originally drawn with shorter hair, which was colored yellow in the first 2 panels he appears in, but black in the third, and that's something that happens. His hair color changes a few times in this version of the story. Pages 11 and 12 of the Super Special have been replaced by completely new art in the first issue of the monthly series. This is when Zach is killed. His Viper gets blown up. And then we see the scene of the Viper pilots. And this is, I think, Starbuck's first appearance where he's playing cards. and they all go off to join the fight. And then finally, pages 17 and 18 were replaced by new art as well. And this includes page 19 is that page I talked about with Lyra. So I imagine, obviously, besides changing Lyra to Serena, so it's basically just showing the attack on Caprica. The second half of this special was completely redrawn for issues 2 and 3, and none of the original art, as shown here, was reprinted. I actually would really like to do a comparison now between those first 3 issues of the monthly series and this, just as a point of comparison. But anyway, I don't have those issues, so I can't do that. And that is the end of my third My Comics History episode. With this, I'll be closer to getting caught up, and hopefully I can do these once a month. So we shall see. Wait, before I go, I got a bit of feedback on the first and second episode of My Comics History shows. The first one is from Peter, writing on the website, which I remind everyone they can do. If you go to longboxreview.com and you can click the comment button on any episode and leave comments. He says, always appreciate a look back at which comics were there at the start of a comic reader/collector's journey. His journey didn't start until late 82, so anything I may have read while following along with these episodes are either back issue buys or hand-me-downs as a kid. For this month, the only comics still in my collection are Brave and the Bold 145, which was Batman and Phantom Stranger, that same Superboy and the Legion issue that I have, and Marvel Premiere 45 featuring Man-Wolf as drawn by our favorite, George Perez. He also says, my back issue buying didn't always dip into the Bronze Age outside of titles such as Teen Titans, JLA, or Wonder Woman, but now I need that Detective Comics issue that I mentioned. Looking forward to more. Well, here you go, Peter. I hope I'm providing some entertainment at the very least. And then on Twitter, George from Meanwhile the Podcast tweeted that he was listening to the October episode, listening to me talk about Amazing Spider-Man 188. I remember, he says, picking up that issue off the spinner rack based solely on the cover, just like I did. He says, good times. Good times indeed, George. So thank you both for that. I appreciate it. If anybody else would like to send me any kind of feedback, comments, Battlestar Galactica images that you want to share, whatever, send them my way. You can email me at longboxreview@gmail.com. As I said, you can leave comments at the website. And with that, I'll talk to you sometime very soon, I hope. And again, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.